But before we start building and designing our new setup, let's take a look at a very useful tool, the VDB reshape node. So in order to do that, let's just drop down a box here, scale it down along one axis, and also drop down a tube. Let's dial down the radius of the tube, like so, add end caps, turn this into a polygon, and increase the polygon's resolution, like so. Then drop down a VDB from polygons node and first wire in the box. Let's set the voxel size to say something 0.005, like so, and copy this over to our tube, which we're going to wire in there as well. Now let's make two copies of the tube by dropping down a transform sub and just transforming our cube along our z-axis. Maybe dial down the scale a bit and copy this. And wire those all together in a merge node, which we're going to feed into our VDB, like so. Maybe move this over a bit and then drop down a VDB combine so we can subtract those tubes from our box. Let's set this to SDF difference and highlight it. So what we get now is, whoops, let's scale up the box a bit, like so. We get this box with the holes in it. What we can do is use a very basic tool to either close or expand those holes. And that tool is called the VDB reshape SDF. It's wired up in here, and by default it's set up to dilate the VDB. So what that does, when I dial this up to say 12, it expands the VDB, so this hole here closes, for example. Also, what I could do is set it to erode this VDB, and these are a bit too many erosion voxels here. So what this does is it actually erodes down the VDB and opens it up a bit to a certain degree until it fails, because we don't have enough voxels for such a huge erosion. So imagine we would like to close this hole. What we could do is set this thing to dilate and dial in a rather big offset, so this hole here is closed, and then after that drop down another VDB reshape SDF and set this to erode and the same offset as our first node, 12 voxels. Wire this up and highlight it. And in theory what that should do is give a geometry of roughly the same dimensions as we had previously before we did those two operations, but with this hole here closed. Also, what I could try doing is invert those operations. So first erode, again I would have to dial down this voxel offset here, like so, and then dilate it by the same amount. And what that does is it opens up parts of the VDB, like up here, for example. And these two subsequent operations, dilation and erosion, or erosion and dilation, can also be done in one step. In this VDB reshape SDF node, that is what the mode open, in this case it first erodes then dilates, just as we did here, it's the same thing, or what the mode close does. So it first dilates and then erodes, like so, where we close this hole with this operation. So the VDB reshape SDF is a really basic sub, which allows on the one hand the expansion of the volume by a given amount of voxels, on the other hand, if you like so, the contraction, the erosion of a volume by a given amount of voxels. Also, it allows you to open and close given holes in a geometry in an SDF that you created. So let's go ahead and combine this node with the advection setup we just created.